Chapter 95, Yan Hui. Who in the world doesn't know that the emperor's meaning is the holy decree? Holy decree, the word holy refers to the Son of Heaven, and refers to the Holy One. But if the emperor has made up his mind, how many people can change it? Not to mention that it is today, it is still the Marquis of Yanji who is dealing with it. Xiao Yuan originally thought that he was coming with the order of the Son of Heaven, and today he would be able to breathe out the depressed anger of the past, so that the Yanji Marquis mansion would bow his head and listen to the order, and the ministers present would tremble, who would want to meet Zhang Sha, who would raise the bar. In terms of lip service, how can a military general be compared with a literati? The two thick eyebrows wrinkled vigorously. Xiao Yuan easily felt that he seemed to be in a predicament, and under the secret shock in his heart, he suddenly slammed into a daze, stared at Zhang Sha gloomily, and actually said, "My Xiao clan's loyalty to the king, I am willing to be a saint's pawn, and the holy decree was written by the saint with my own eyes. How can I miss the opportunity because of your small words of the head of the Qing minister's department? Today, my father is going to kill the chickens and make an example of the monkey, and see if I behead you, the thief who obstructs the holy will and colludes with the party. Will the saint punish your sins, or the sin of this duke?" When the words fell, he really raised his sword and went to Zhang Sha. All the guests in the hall were even more shocked. One was the big hat that Xiao Yuan suddenly put on people, and the two of them revealed the dangerous meaning between his words and actions, and immediately some people shouted, "Dingguo Gong is going to kill innocents indiscriminately." Zhang Xuning was covered in blood. Because she remembered that in the previous life, Shen Lang obviously ordered to confiscate the Yanji Ho mansion, and put everyone in the Ho mansion in prison, waiting for the case to be clarified before it was released. But when she rushed to the Ho mansion that day, she saw blood all over the ground and people falling down the stairs. This proves that either something happened during the crown ceremony in the previous life, or Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo who was in charge of this matter, deliberately found an excuse to kill. Seeing Xiao Yuan approaching Zhang Sha step by step, the surrounding ministers of civil and military affairs were even more angry, causing many soldiers who surrounded the hall to clench their swords one after another, looking ready to do it at any time. Zhang Xuning was so nervous that she couldn't breathe. She could feel the danger of getting out of control more than anyone present. At the critical moment, his eyes swept across the venue, but he easily saw Xiao Ye, the second son of the Xiao family, who was standing on the side of the young guests, not far from the position of Yang's his eyes companions, so the thought that had been hovering in his mind suddenly popped up. Zhang Xuning quickly stepped forward and whispered a word to Shen Zai. Shen Zai was frowning at the chaotic situation in front of her, and after hearing this, she glanced at Zhang Xuning in surprise, but after only thinking about it, she showed a little surprise, and then turned her gaze to Xiao Ye as well. The sword that Zhang Xuning gave to Yan Lin earlier was not included in the warehouse, but was held by Qing Feng and stood aside. Shen Zai didn't say a word, stepped forward and lifted the sword box, lifted the sword, and waited to go to Xiao Ye. Xiao Ye and Yan Lin are also people of the same age, but since he was born, he has been compared with Yan Lin everywhere. How can he also be the sister-in-law of the Xiao family? How can he be happy? What's more, he had a quarrel with Yan Lin before. At this moment, he stood close and looked at the unlucky appearance of the Yanji Marquis mansion, not to mention how happy he was, so he almost stroked his palms and laughed. His expression was not only different from the panic of the people in this hall, but he was full of smiles, and he didn't notice the strangeness of Zhang Xuning and Shen Zai. However, the sword was unexpectedly heavy. Shen Zai was caught off guard, and as soon as he lifted the sword, he was taken by its weight and almost fell to the ground. This attracted the attention of the surroundings. Xiao Ye looked over, and she couldn't help but look at Xiao Ye. At that moment, a fierce chill climbed up from Xiao Ye's tail vertebrae, and the previous smile disappeared from his face in an instant, and his reaction was faster than a rabbit. and he immediately shouted at the top of his throat, "Father, save me!" Xiao Yuan, who was about to raise his sword and press it against Zhang She's neck, was suddenly stunned. When he looked back, he saw Xiao Ye, who was standing there, pulling out his legs and running towards the side. Shen Zai was suddenly anxious. The place where Zhang Xuning was standing was a little outside, on the way that Xiao Ye was about to pass. Her eyelids jumped, secretly thinking that the plan couldn't catch up with the changes, although she told herself 10,000 times in her heart not to show her traces on the cusp of the storm, but at the moment when Xiao Ye hurriedly ran in front of her in a hurry, she finally gritted her teeth fiercely. Bang! Kicked out directly, and was on Xiao Ye's lap. This eldest brother escaped for his life well, and he was thinking that he would lose his chance, or he would become a tool for others to coerce, and he never thought that he would encounter such a black kick on the way. Who can react between the lightning and the fire? When he saw Zhang Xuning, he only felt a chill in his heart, and there was a sharp pain in his knees, and he involuntarily fell to the ground face down, and his head slammed on the hard ground with a bang, and even bled into blood. Shen Zai finally got a chance at this time, reacted, and immediately stepped forward with a sword and pressed it on Xiao Ye's neck. Xiao Yuan was furious. "Your Royal Highness the eldest princess, what do you mean by this?" Shen Zai already vaguely knew the attitude of the Queen Mother and the Imperial brother towards the Yanji Marquis mansion, and even if the Royal brother wanted to come today, the Queen Mother did not allow it. If Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo, is also official, she naturally doesn't care about anything, but now that she is like this, it is really too deceitful. She is Yan Lin's playmate and friend, how can she bear it? In the end, it is a princess of a dynasty and an empire. When Shen Zai pulled her face down, she was also very frightened, and said coldly, "Brother Wang's holy decree told you to arrest, but you want to kill you." Xiao Yuan, listen well, the people in this hall dare to move, this princess guarantees, you are not a bad son, and your head will fall to the ground immediately. The sword was wielded freely in Yan Lin's hand, but it was a little reluctant in her hand. The tip of the sword is pressed against the ground, and the blade forms an angle with the ground. Xiao Ye's neck was in this corner. Shen Zai's wrist moved because of the heaviness, the angle was a little smaller, and the blade of the sword was almost close to Xiao Ye's neck, making him immediately howl in frustration, "Father, she wants to kill me, save me." Not to mention Xiao Yuan, this is what everyone in the Yanji Marquis mansion didn't expect. The guests inside and outside were stunned again. Zhang She's neck was also suppressed by Xiao Yuan's sword, but at this moment, he couldn't help but look up. Zhang Xuning was standing there silently, not showing the appearance of mountains and water, but few people saw that the key kick just now was kicked by her. In the last life, she did not come, and this life finally came. Is it to make up for the mistakes of the previous life and the regrets of the previous life? The Xiao family is now such a lifeline, still waiting for him to inherit the family business, and Xiao Ye was also carefully raised by Xiao Yuan. It is rare to be close to him. Where would he think that Shen Zai would use this as a threat? Xiao Yuan said solemnly, "Is Her Royal Highness the eldest princess on the side of the Yan clan and wants to disobey the holy decree?" Shen Zai didn't hear it, and didn't put Dingguo Gong in his eyes at all. First, the holy decree is issued in accordance with the law. What Lord Zhang of the criminal department said is that you should go back and affix the big seal. Second, this princess doesn't care what happens in your court. The prisoner will be beheaded after the autumn, and today is the Yan Lin crown ceremony, which has not yet ended, and you can't wait for you to do anything wrong. Either you step back at this moment, or I will kill your son. At this moment, the kind of decisiveness and killing on her face was something Zhang Xuning had never seen. The fragility that had held her and wept in the night of the Mingfeng Palace was also covered by hard armor. The real phoenix is cold. When Yan Lin opened his mouth, he was stunned, and when Zhang Xuning and Shen Zai made a move, they stood still and stared. The Minister of Civil and Military Affairs who came to the crown ceremony was also dissatisfied with Xiao Yuan coming with an unstamped holy decree, and the chicken feathers were used as arrows, and Shen Zai stood up to speak, and finally someone who really couldn't see it also came out and echoed, the men's crown ceremony, from the young to the long, is born only once, why should Dingguo Gong do this thing? Yes, that's too deceitful. Gradually, the voices in the hall became more and more loud. If these people gather in the court, they are also a great force. Xiao Yuan listened, and his face gradually became difficult to look at. Yan Lin raised his head slightly, and a hot blood in his chest gushed out from the jumping atrium, burning him trembling slightly, and even his eyes were a little red, and the surging meaning was almost like a fire, burning the haze and ice that had been pressed down so that they dissipated and dissolved. The world is difficult and dangerous, but human affection is sometimes cold, and sometimes it is warm. The young man's fingers hanging at his side slowly clenched, and he just wanted to carve the scene in front of him and engrave it deeply into his memory. Xie Wei stood tall in the hall, dressed in snow-white plain clothes that were not stained with dust, only looked at Xiao Yuan's changing complexion, and then glanced at Shen Zai, who was holding a sword against Xiao Ya and Xiao Yuan, and finally opened his mouth and said, Dingguo Gong should take a step back first. Xiao Yuan noticed that he was here today. It's just that the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty all knew that Xie Wei was a close minister of the Son of Heaven, and he felt that the saint was obedient to this person, so others dared to offend, but he always regarded Xie Wei as not existing, lest he cause any trouble. Didn't expect Xie Wei to say this to him. Xiao Yuan stared at him and said, Young master, is it also going to be on the Yan clan's side? Xie Wei waved his hand lightly, signaling the praiser who was standing on the side to go down, but he looked calm, and even smiled lightly, and said, the errand was handed in by the saint, and the one to be done is the Yanji Marquis mansion, and the grandfather of the country is just the middle person, so it is better to be cautious in everything. Many soldiers are here, and it is just a matter of going back and running for one more trip, why not have the best of both worlds? And since it is the invitation of all the colleagues in the hall at present, if the Holy Lord asks, the Grandpa Guo has told the truth, although the Holy Lord will be angry, but presumably he will not be angry. Everyone gasped when they heard this. The eyes around Xie Wei were all shocked for a while, thinking more shallowly, and even a little angry. Xiao Yuan was also stunned when he heard this, and then he was excited, and immediately reacted. Xie Wei's words seemed to be interceding for the Yanji Marquis mansion, but in fact, he was talking about the consequences of these people standing on the side of the Yanji Marquis mansion. If the divine decree arrives immediately, the Yanji Haofu will also be copied, but if someone dares to pick the thorn of the holy decree and stand on the side of the home mansion and speak for the home mansion, if the Holy Lord knows about it, Long Yan will definitely be furious. At that time, there is nothing wrong with him in this matter, and this account will not be counted on the head of the Yanji home mansion in the end. Returning to the palace and stamping the big seal seems impossible, but in fact it is promising. Thinking about this joint in the middle, Xiao Yuan almost couldn't help laughing, and then looked at Xie Wei and felt that he really looked like the immortal of the nine heavens, the sage on the top of the high platform, exquisite, so he briskly put away the sword, and said, since it is Mr. Xie who speaks, this face is rarely given. This duke will go back to the palace first, report this matter to the saint, and come back later. Xie Wei was silent. Zhang Xuning could feel a little whispering around him, and everyone's eyes seemed to drift to Xie Wei's body, as if some people felt that his move was very criticized. However, if you think about it a little deeper, you can't help but throw yourself at Xie Wei's 5 bodies. In a word, there is nothing more than this. I also knew that the person who would come to the Yanji Marquis mansion to be the guest of honor for Yan Lingwenli should not be some kind of sinister villain, but when he said this, he was able to smoothly settle the two sides, easily resolve the deadlock, and even state the pros and cons. The most taboo thing for the king is that the military generals have high merits, and the merits of the Yanji Marquis mansion in recent years are not considered to be the masters, but the matter involves collusion and rebellion against the party, which is sensitive in the end. If the civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty are on the side of the home mansion, how do you know that it will not harm the home mansion? Their behavior has already gone too far. If you are lucky enough to survive this catastrophe today, you should be cautious in your words and deeds, and don't harm the home mansion. Xiao Yuan had already made a draft, and only waited to return to the palace to report the situation of the Marquis of Yanji's mansion, and ordered the soldiers around him, fence this mansion all, and half a person is not allowed to enter or leave. After speaking, he looked at Shenzai. The anger on his face surged up again, and he said in a deep voice, "Your Royal Highness, the princess should release people, right?" Shenzai didn't speak, and took the sword back. But Xiao Ye almost fell to the ground with his head on the ground, and his knees hurt again, but he couldn't get up by himself. Xiao Shu glanced at Zhang Xuning deeply, and then waved her hand and asked the people who were waiting on the left and right to come forward and help people up. The heavy soldiers of the besieging mansion guarded every corner of the mansion. The servants in the house were as white as paper. But Xiao Yuan returned to the palace with the holy decree. The hall was silent. Yan Mu looked at Xie Wei for a long time, speechless, and after a long time, he was shocked, gritted his teeth and said loudly, "Since you are crowned, please Mr. Xie give me words." The praiser has never seen such a scene, and his hands and feet are weak and cannot move. The old housekeeper reacted quickly, and immediately presented the pen, ink, paper, and inkstone prepared in the morning, and bowed down to Xie Wei, "Please give the word for the son." Yan Lin also looked at Xie Wei. Zhang Xuaning's 5 fingers were quietly clenched in her sleeves, and she didn't even feel the slightest pain in her wrists, so she couldn't help but hold her breath and look at it without blinking. The rice paper is laid out in a lacquered plate and held aloft by the butler. Everyone's eyes fell on Xie Wei. He put on a wide-sleeved robe in one hand, picked up the pen, and when it was about to fall, he stopped for a long time, wrote a word, and stopped, and finally put down the pen, and said, "The world is unpredictable." The original 2 words, now only this one word, is not bad. The people looked at the paper. The words are like dragons and snakes, all hidden between the strokes. At first glance there is no sharp edge, and the strength of the fine product is strong. But there is only one word, saying, back. Yan Lin, single word back. Daypen rises with the wind one day and soars up to 90,000 miles. But the sky is not a place to stay, and the sea is where the heart returns. The word is back.